Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's discussion is going to focus on intellectual property and how artists are protected in terms of their copyrights. And these are artists ranging from musicians to and more. Joining us for this very important discussion, we have the Registrar General, Mr. Richard Kayibanda. Thank you for joining The Square.
Thank you for welcoming me to the show.
Great. We're also joined by artist, many of you know him, Mani Martin. Thank you for honoring our invitation.
Thanks for having me.
Great. My name is Danam Pisi, host of The Square, and as always, I'm joined by The Square's resident panelists. I'll start with my left on The Square. On our midweek recap that we usually do, and I hope it won't take too long, Brenna and Charles. As always, very interesting debates between you. So before we kick off, we're just going to have a very quick midweek highlight. Brenna, I'm going to kick off. I'm going to start with you. Is there something you'd like to share?
Yes, I mean, like we were discussing, we have agreed to disagree with Charles on this issue of drunk driving. Of course, it's around Mehdi. I think it's unfortunate, but I think that the law enforcement agencies should be given a chance to do their job. That's one. And two, I think suddenly we are seeing in restaurants and bars, he's going to stand there and read the notice, and say, oh, they don't sell alcohol here just because there's a notice. I think the enforcement, if any restaurant or bar actually means that it is not selling alcohol, then if it's a supermarket, there should be a designated area for alcohol. That's one. Two, they should apologize in advance for asking people for their IDs to confirm their age. I think that at least would go away in proving that they're trying to not to sell alcohol to
and
minors.
walk the talk, basically.
Yeah, and walk the talk. Yeah.
Charles, over to you.
My primary school English teacher taught me a very powerful saying, that there are very many ways of skinning a cat. I am not pro people who drink and drive, but that's not the topic of today. I will rest this case by saying only one thing. The approach of the national police is depriving the Rwandan government of billions of revenue. I rest my case.
Charles,
Another topic for another day.
I mean, that's like a loaded statement with no research.
And that's why it's going to be another topic for another day. I mean, we've discussed this
and we must wait for the research to come out.
We've discussed this on The Square before. We've had the Rwanda National Police, we've had the Rwanda Hospitality Association here, and definitely we need part two, I think, on this conversation. Yes? So, over to you, back to you, to our guests, Richard and Mani Martin. Thank you for joining us. We are here to discuss intellectual property. And you know how, and in this case, we're going to focus on copyright and focus on artists. There's also, industrial trade rights and so forth and so on, but we want to focus on artists, so to speak. So if you'll just allow me to address the first question to you, Richard. The World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, defines intellectual property as creations of the mind, such as inventions, literacy and artistic works, designs and symbols, names and images used in commerce. So these are ideas and concepts, original ideas and concepts that are used, for a monetary gain. Now, in many developing countries, the intellectual property is always a challenge in terms of enforcing it. If you can just start off the conversation by telling us the current status of Rwanda's intellectual property strategy under your office at Rwanda Development Board.
Okay, thank you, Diana. You've given a general definition of intellectual property, and I will not come back to that. But as you said briefly, it's all about rights and creations of mind, ranging from copyrights to industrial property. And if we look at the current status of intellectual property in Rwanda, like in many developing countries, as you have said, we have done a lot, but we still have a journey ahead so that we can be able to reach a stage where we would feel like intellectual property rights are really enforced so that their holders can fully benefit from them. But briefly speaking, we have all we need to have these rights enjoyed. We have the regulatory framework. We have basically different international conventions that our country has ratified, from the Berne Convention, which is about copyright, as you highlighted, the Paris Convention on Industrial Property, and many other conventions, including conventions that are negotiated under the auspices of WIPO, World Intellectual Property Organization, but also those negotiated under the auspices of ARIPO, that is African Regional Intellectual Property Organization. So we have a number of them that we have ratified as a country, protecting both copyrights and industrial property. And at a national level, at a domestic level, we have the main law, which was enacted in 2009, which covers both copyright and industrial property. That is the main instrument that govern copyright and industrial property. We have a single piece of registration. In some other countries, you would have different pieces of registration. But for us, we have a single piece of registration governing both copyrights and industrial property. And it provides for different rights, for different institutional mechanisms to administer and ensure enforcement of these rights. And we do have also some secondary pieces of registration that enforces this one, including the ministerial orders on the implementation of this main piece of registration. We do also have a policy, the intellectual property policy.
Is this under RDB?
No, that is under Ministry of Trade and Industry. Maybe if I go back a bit, RDB is in charge of IP administration, the daily management of IP, intellectual property rights. That is, we are in charge of registering copyrighted works and other intellectual property works so that their holders can get titles to assert ownership. And in addition, we do also awareness, and sometimes we do mediation in cases of conflict. But the policy institution or policy institutions are mainly MINICOM, which is the policy institution. But when it comes to copyrights, there is also a role that is played by MINISPOC.
Okay.
Yeah. So policy level is at the ministries, but the implementation is at the level of RDB. So mainly RDB is in charge of daily IP management.
But just very quickly, if you can break it down. So for instance, the square, like this, as a concept, as a talk show, you know, from design to the concept, we're supposed to have come to RDB and registered this whole entity as intellectual property, right?
Yes.
Essentially, that's what you're saying. RDB would handle.
Yes, definitely.
Actually, I also have a clarification along the same lines, and because when you're asking the question, I was saying Mani Martin nodded his head quite a bit, because just assume you're talking to a stadium of people in Nyamagabe. You say that RDB's role is the policy supervision. Was that the word that you used?
Administration.
Administration.
Yes.
So you register the intellectual property. Somebody comes to you and says the square is mine. Nobody should claim the square. You give them the certificate that you rightfully own the square. And the administration means that you go ahead to ensure that nobody else should use the square. Am I right?
Oh, okay. When it comes to
Or imitates the square, I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
when it comes to administration, what I mean is that if that person has already filed with us that application and we have granted the title, it cannot be granted
Again.
by us to someone else.
Yes.
Okay. So you don't have a mechanism of policing.
Yes, I was going to elaborate more on other institutions.
And their roles, their
and their
complementary roles.
Yes, and their roles.
Yes.
So I think we've elaborated a bit more on the role of RDB and ministries that are at the policy level. But once the the intellectual property right is legally
It's copyrighted.
Yes. for artistic work or
Yes.
literary work, and for other intellectual property rights, we may use other patents for
Yes.
inventions,
Trademarks.
industrial designs. So once that title is granted, then in case of infringement, there are other institutions that come into play. These are mainly the National Police, the Rwanda Investigation Bureau, because infringement on intellectual property is both a criminal offense and a civil wrong. So when it comes to criminal aspects, then it's the role of institutions that are in charge of criminal violations that amount to criminal offenses. But there is also a civil aspect of it. Once you have a right, because intellectual property is a right like any other right, once your right is infringed on, you are entitled to a remedy or a redress. That one, you get it from the civil courts, but specifically for intellectual property matters, you go to commercial courts. But maybe before you go there, you can also use amicable approaches to see if or the matter can be resolved. But if it cannot be resolved, then you can resort to courts, courts of law. And that is up to the right holder to pursue civil actions against any infringing.
Depending on how they feel aggrieved, the extent to which they feel aggrieved.
Definitely.
Okay.
Which is what I want us to open up with Mani Martin, the aggrievement part and, having your work used. So, when you talk about copyright, it relates to granting the creator of the original work the authority to determine who and when uses their work. And recently you complained on social media that some of your work was used by a certain group, and it was your music. You're a songwriter, singer, and performing artist, but this sample of your work was used without your permission, without your knowledge, without your... So in this situation, what do you think should have been done? And does this happen to you often? Do you think this happens to artists often in Rwanda?
Well, the issue that I recently raised on social media was I was about to shed a light on some issues that always happen in our industry. And yes, it happens to me every time, and
really?
not only to me, but to so many artists.
Yes.
And it's not only that school of music that was performing my music, but everywhere you go, in bars, in hotels, you find people performing your music, and it's nice. It's something good because, it feels like you've done something that is impacting the society positively, and this is what we do it for, to make people happy. But then there's this other side of me that asks me, but so what? Like, what do I get from it? So, because, it's your work being used in someone else's interest. So you ask yourself, isn't there a system in my country that can help me to, to make this work return something to me? So that's why I just said what I said on social media. And it was not even about complaining because they have performed my song, but I was complaining because in Rwanda, it seems like people in general, the society does not even consider the intellectual property as a property. This is why I can say thank you so much for bringing this on a national TV, because you know some people think it's just like it grows like trees on the mountains.
Yes.
Yet it's a creative
Process.
It's a creative process. You invest your energy, your emotional energy, even the money, for you to have a song out there. So and the law says that, I mean, the copyright law says like people like students can use your music without your permission, without paying for it, if they're performing it for fellow students or parents in school or any other public event, if they're performing for free. But for me, I did not want to believe that like an institution like the Ministry of Culture would be looking for free performers who are going to perform someone else's music. Yet we have the professional musicians,
Exactly.
including those who are finalists from that school. So because I don't see it in other industries whereby you can have, let's say, a school of construction, and then when it comes to building tall buildings, you still call the students from that school to do the job. Yet you have other experienced professionals, including those who are finalists from that school. Anyway, maybe that's another topic for another day.
Yes.
But when I bring it to the intellectual property and copyright law, what I wish should be done is any institution in charge, including RDB, should actually do whatever it takes to facilitate our society of authors to be able to be collecting the artist royalty, because it's something that does not really happen in Rwanda. Because if that can be put in action, no artist will claim that his music is being performed, because whenever music is performed, then you'll be getting something out of it. Yeah.
We'll come back to the Rwandan Society of Authors very quickly. And I'm glad that you raised it, Mani Martin. But Brenna, is there something you'd like to add as well?
You know, I feel him.
I can see.
Thank you.
I can see.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I feel him, and I share his frustration. And I really feel that Rwandan artists deserve more than they are currently getting, and we tend to take them for granted. Now, it's not unique to artists, though. I'll give you an example from my background, which is journalism. We get people who, now the current trend is digital media. So people will wake up in the morning and read, go to the New Times website, read a story, and that's it. But there's someone who has written that story. This someone has a family.
Yes.
Nobody's thinking about the process of content,
Yes.
The moment you introduce a paywall, then we will have the same fight. If the New Times was to introduce a paywall and say, before you read our lead story, pay maybe 1,000, you'll see the kind of debate. And that's why I agree with you so much, in terms of raising awareness. I think it's good that we have the policy, we are making the right baby steps, but I think public awareness around innovation and protecting these ideas, I think has to really, really be intensified. Because I was surprised, there were people who were disappointed that he was raising the issue, on social media. There were people who thought he didn't have the right. But I mean, ask him. He spends, sleepless nights somewhere, buried somewhere, trying to come up with lyrics. And I think he has the right to say, look, you cannot use this, you cannot, do this. Having said that, I mean, if we look at the trend globally with, IP involvement and rights, it's a transition. It cannot happen overnight. And it's a process, it's a painful process that takes long. I mean, the kind of rights he's fighting for probably, I can confidently almost say your children will be, perhaps, if you decide to have children, will be the
Sad
ones
story.
to enjoy. Yes,
But that's why I have to be there and stand for it.
Right now.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Leading in terms of trying to, I think China is second to the US in patent rights fighting. But at some point, you know, even up to today, we still have China fighting with the US over IP rights, you know. And then for some countries, especially in Asia, I mean, if you look at Japan, South Korea, there are countries which have deliberately kept quiet about IP rights because they are still a net importer of, you know, innovation. So I'm sure that the legislation and the enforcement that you would like to see will eventually come at some point. You know, the more we innovate and perhaps be exporters. But at the moment, we remain a net importer of innovation. So I think that's the background.
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
Charles.
So, and I think probably Richard is the one in the most uncomfortable seat where we are here, because the biggest issue here is really around the policing of this, whether across the whole divide, IP, patent rights, across the whole divide. The issue here is around policing, and however much you may want to throw it at partner institutions, it still comes down to the same thing. How do we ensure that the originator of that trademark, of that originality, is protected? That's the elephant in the room. And I want to give you 2 examples. When I was, for the last 2 weeks or so, there's a particular song by Gilles Senore that's a very old song that he redid, Dimbahasi. I have been trying to download that song for 2 weeks for free. I only managed last night at 10 p.m.
Are you reporting yourself on live
Yes,
television?
no, see, I mean, by virtue of the fact that I managed to do it, that means there's a loophole in the system.
Yeah,
but there were a lot of YouTube and other video options. I did not want a video option. I wanted an audio option. It has taken me 2 weeks. So that is progress.
Good for you.
Right? But
It's not good for Gilles Senore.
Several years ago, I think at the time Rwanda was Alliance Express or something like that. Cecile Kairewa did complain that they were playing her music on the airline and she had no clue at all. Everyone was up in arms and say, thank God that at least everyone who flies the national carrier is able to listen to your music.
Denying her the right to actually argue that.
Thank you very much.
Give me something in
Yes,
return.
thank you very much.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
They're doing you a favor.
Then the people who are eating the food, they ask the restaurant to say, thank you for eating my food. It doesn't happen. And when you say consuming my music, I should be thankful because you're consuming my music for free. It's just the same as consuming that food from the restaurant.
You were absolutely right. But I wanted to ask a very, very specific question. And Richard, again, we don't want to put you on the spot, but I just want to sort of give comfort to the consumers or the people who need this protection, that from a protection level you are covered. And I'll give you one other example, not of infringement, but of a provision in the law that requires radio stations to pay a percentage of their revenue to the artists. I don't know
The
how.
Rwanda Society of Authors.
Yes, the
that
Rwanda
will
Society
then give
of
it to
Authors, yes.
the artists.
Whenever they play their music. So the issue here is, yes, we have the beautiful laws in place. That's a first step in the right direction. But what about the implementation, Richard? Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
But just very quickly, before we get to the Rwandan Society of Artists, because it's in the next part of the topic that I want us to discuss, if you can just start by answering Mani, Martin, Bernard, and Charles in terms of their interventions.
Yeah. Starting from what Mani Martin said, we have the law in place. We have institutional mechanisms in place, and when there is an infringement, if there is an infringement, the steps that leading to redress should be taken. I understand that we have to agree that this concept of intellectual property sounds like a new concept to most of the Rwandans, but it's been there for quite some years. But
At least the last decade.
Yes.
Since 2000.
And I have also to say that forums like this one are also important to educate the general public that this is a property like others. Yes. This is, by the way, the rationale of intellectual property is to ensure that someone who has invested efforts, time, and money in coming up with a creation using his or her mind, her intellect, or his intellect, gets reward for that. If what you've invested, you should be able to get it. Otherwise, if you cannot get it, then you will not be willing to produce more. And that is the essence of intellectual property. That's why it is there. But again, the lease need to ensure that this whole thing is understood by both users and right holders, so that we can reach a stage where the purpose of the law is achieved. It requires joint efforts of both institutions that are in charge at the level of administration, at the level of enforcement. And again, for your information in this sense of having collaborative efforts, RDB do also mediate when there are cases of infringement. It intervenes to mediate. But in addition to that, we are doing awareness. This is one forum, but we've been here in June. We've been organizing nationwide road shows, telling people that these are rights like others. These are rights that should be.
Happened?
Yes, it happened.
Breaking news.
Breaking news to me.
It happened last financial year,
Okay.
and every year as RDB, because we do also have awareness as part of our mandate. Because as Charles was saying, if you have nice laws and people are not aware of them, both right holders and users, then they would not serve their purpose. So that's why we have an awareness plan every year. We've had road shows, we've had trainings with some groups of individuals that we think are potential users of these copyrighted works and other intellectual property rights, but also people we think are involved in creation of intellectual property assets. So that means that I've said that we have a lot in place, but we still have a lot to do. Yeah, but it will be a joint effort of both players. Like what Charles said when the case of Kairebga was raised, people were saying, no, you should be rather happy that you are. There is also that feeling, I guess Mani Marite would agree with me, that even on the side of creators, authors, there is that feeling that if your song, let's say, is played, then it's a sort of promotion. But we need both artists and users, to know that this is their job is creating songs that we enjoy, and as Mani Marite said, he gave an example of a restaurant. As we are enjoying food, we also enjoy music, and we
should give rewards for it.
Yes. Otherwise, if there is no reward for it, then the next coming, I don't know how many years, we will not be able to have the same.
But just very quickly,
can I give you, as you may well be aware of, I'm in the real estate business. One time we were promoting a shopping mall here in Kigali, and we moved around the world looking for tenants. Then we come across this owner of brands, and we're trying to pull those brands into our shopping center. And the guy tells us, how do you expect me to come into your country when somebody stole my brands and brought them to your country, and I've been fighting I've been begging the government to ensure. Took about 7 years. The culprit has stopped using those brands.
The business collapsed.
I'm not sure the business collapsed, but he stopped using the brand. I think he lost a court case. But this is what happened.
Is this brand to do with the food?
Yeah, it was Chicken In and Pizza In. I think we were not going to dwell on. Yes, Chicken In and Pizza In.
Yes.
But for purposes of my example, the person who had actually taken the brands came to us and asked to take us space in one of our shopping centers, and said, no, we are not going to allow you to come into our shopping center unless you actually prove that you are the rightful owner of those brands. The guy said, fine, there's no problem. I'll go next door and the other landlords will allow me to go into their shopping centers. Indeed, it happened. So I believe that the awareness has to go to, has to take a notch higher. You still have a lot of work to do, because you see, it is one thing to look at the artists. But what about the owners of the radio stations? What about the DJs?
What about the hotels? What about
the hotels? What about, the road shows? Where do you go? I'm very, very shocked. And I hope, Richard, don't take this too personal. I think Mani Marte means it in a very good way. When he was saying that he didn't know that you actually do these road shows, is because within him and his circles, it has never gotten to him. Am I a good ambassador of your message? Yes. Yes. So I think there's a lot of work, Richard, that needs to be done, but in that regard. And I would probably recommend that let it not be your work alone, because the musicians, the artists, all the other people work through associations and they have organs. In Rwanda, one of the most efficient ways I've seen is auto-regulation. So if you could look at these people as your own partners and stakeholders, I think it would help you quite a lot in terms of this awareness campaign, yes.
I'd like to take us to now the aspect of actual rewards that exist in this country for artists. Like you've said, tonight's conversation is focusing on copyright and artists in this regard. And the Rwanda Association of Authors is the entity that is in charge of collecting royalties for artists in the country, right? But I just want to read a couple of things that I found very interesting. And my question is to you is, does the Rwanda Association of Authors actually, since this directive in 2017, what's the status? Because in terms of getting royalties for artists, this is basically work, from artists based on, these are places such as nightclubs, restaurants, and radio stations. Are supposed to pay the RSAU royalties. And hotels and restaurants with between 0 and 2 stars will be required to pay 1,100 and required to pay a percentage of their gross revenue when they play this artist's music. But this will be determined after they have presented records of their playlists to RSAU. So personally, I'm thinking, how practical is this? Is implementation of this. Contact FM will pay RSAU, on an annual basis. This is how many times we played Mani Martin's song. Who monitors it? Is there an algorithm? Is there digital sort of equipment that monitors this? Does Mani Martin sit every day and listen to how many times they play his song? I mean, yeah, but most importantly...
Who will invest in that technology?
Exactly. So is there technology for it? I know you're not RSAU, but I'm sure you work closely with them and understand a large part of their mandate. So question number one is, do you think since 2017, since I've been doing this, is it practical? What's the status? 1. 2, we've heard, and this is to you, Mani Martin, we've heard of musicians who actually go and tell RSAU, please stay away. Let them play our songs on radio, because when they play our songs on radio, we actually get, promote it. Exactly. Let them play it in bars and restaurants because we get promoted. The minute you go and tell these institutions to pay, they won't play my music, and therefore, so you have artists who are against this whole royalty collection process by RSAU, and then at the same time you have institutions that don't get it. They don't understand why they have to pay. So I know we talked about this before we started the show, and you have been a mediator between artists and institutions that amicably resolve these issues. But can you shed more light on that?
Yeah. But before I go that, I wanted to highlight something in respect to what has been said earlier by
please go ahead.
interveners. I have to say that awareness it's all about, yes, there is letting people know that this exists, but it's also changing people's mindset. So awareness is a process, is an ongoing process, and you cannot achieve the set goals or reach the set goals within 1 year, 2 years. It's a process. So we do have, as I have said earlier, we do have a plan for every year. So we look at how we can approach it for each specific year, and definitely we will continue until we feel that the ultimate goal that we want, that holders of intellectual property rights are able to enjoy their rights. So it's an ongoing exercise. It's not a thing that you do in 1 day and you have achieved your result and you sleep. And you cannot reach each and every one at the same time. But we've had sessions with some of the users, the consumers of operated products, and there is that resistance. That one we cannot ignore it. But at the end of the day, it is a role. There is a role to be played by all players, as we've highlighted. And coming back to this scheme, the royalties collection. As per the law on intellectual property protection, a private company is empowered to do the licensing, the royalty correction, and distribution to the authors. And this is justified. It has practical, economic, and legal advantages. Imagine an artist like Man Malte, who is normally busy composing songs, etc., running after every radio station, every bar, every hotel, every nightclub, and any other user. That would be economically expensive, practically impossible, and legally expensive as well, because he would have to incur cost of negotiating a contract with each of these many potential users. But it is also it would also be the same for users. Imagine if you are a radio station and you have to enter into agreements with, or leave alone foreign artists, Rwandan copyright holders, it would not be practically possible.
So that's we understand that's the purpose of RSAU. Yes, but in the interest of time, if you could just tell us the key question: is it a practical way to deal with royalty collection?
Yes, that's where I was heading. You alluded to the 2017 directive. This private company that collects royalties, that enters into licenses, is supervised by the Intellectual Property Office, which is RDB. So in 2016, towards the end of 2016, there was a scheme of royalties, but which was later amended in 2018, in October last year. And it used to have a mechanism of payment where any user would pay a percentage of the gross income they have earned. If you are a restaurant, if you are a hotel, you have made this amount of income, then there was a percentage. I don't have the figures, but that one did not sound proper for users, but also the collective management organization, that is ASIU. That's why they came up with a new, they looked at the best practices elsewhere.
So sorry to keep on cutting you short, but we really have a few minutes left and we have to go to a Twitter. So the question was, and I think before we go to Money Matter, is you've explained to us RSAU, its mandate, the need for it to exist. Absolutely, no artist can go on their own and do what the institution does, which is great. But at the end of the day, and you said there was an amendment in 2018.
Yes.
Why is that? Just if you can just pinpoint and tell us.
Yes.
What was the reason for to amend?
That's what I wanted to elaborate on.
Yes.
It's because both the collective management organization, that is the RSAU, did not find it working, but also the users were complaining because you had to go and look into the books of account of a given user.
So do they now pay a flat fee?
Yes. So now there is a flat fee. There is a flat fee now, and
how did you come to that flat fee?
they looked at different fees that are applied regionally because we are not an isolated country. So they looked at fees that are applied in the region and came up with a proposal, which proposal was discussed with key stakeholders
yes.
On the side of public institutions, but also institutions that represent users to see if they are...
Yeah, very quickly, do you actually go, because I want really to hear from Money Matter on this, does RSAU go with that flat fee and distribute it to artists? They actually receive royalties? That's what we want to understand. Does this actually work in Rwanda?
Yes, they are collecting some fee. They are collecting some fees, but I have to say that, as I said earlier...
How much is it?
The flat fee.
The flat fee. We have different fees, but I can highlight some. For instance, for a bar that has a public place where the copyrighted works are played, because it's now a flat fee, but by function of square meters, the capacity of the place where the copyrighted works are played. So, like if we take a bar that has a space of up to 100 square meters, it has to pay a fee of 427,000
per year.
Per year to play all.
Okay, gives you a blank check.
Yes.
Local artists.
Let me ask a stupid question.
and foreign.
Yeah, let me ask a stupid question. So if Inyundo band, I think they have another, they're called Seveya, is it?
No, they have different bands.
Okay. So if the one of the bands from Nyundo Art School comes to play music at Riders, as long as Riders has paid that 400 and something thousand francs per year, there is no problem at all with that band playing Mani Martin's music. Is that what it means?
If they're playing that music, being paid, they should still ask for permission. That's
irrespective of whether they have paid that annual fee or not.
Yes.
What?
But I'm sorry to break this up.
And you find that fair?
Yes, we need to... No, sorry to break it up. We really, in the interest of time, Money Matter, I want to ask you, because, thank you, Richard, you've expounded as much as you can. We have a time limit. We need to talk to we need to read our tweets for people who want some more information. Very quickly, Money Matter, does this work for you? Have you ever gotten royalties? Do you think it actually is something?
Not yet. But before I go to that, I would like to add on what Richard said. We're talking about something that is doable in so many other countries. Yet, as you know, in Rwanda we have so many other things that we can do that other countries have not yet done. So I don't see why this is becoming a big problem, a big issue to resolve, to solve, yet we can do other things. So I think some other efforts, I insist on more efforts, should be put on this case. And it hasn't been worked for me because I haven't received any royalties yet. But I think if this is
why?
I don't know why.
Have you asked for it?
I think if that effort that I'm insisting is put on this issue,
Yes.
this can work for every creator in Rwanda.
But my question to you is, you know what he explained to us, sometimes the users, there's pushback. It's because they don't want to play, I understand. You as an artist, have you been in a situation where you say, you go to RSAU and say, no, don't tell them to play, because if they don't play my music, I'm in trouble? Because
Me,
that's what happens.
I don't think there's any artist who is against that. I will call that embracing vulnerability. When you're vulnerable enough, you reach at the level of feeling like that's what you deserve. So I don't think any artist will be okay with his work being used for free simply because they are promoting it. And this is what I want to tell, the viewers.
Yes.
Allow me to say this.
Please, go ahead. Yeah.
Being glad that you're using my work does not make you use it for free. Because every other service provider is happy that you're receiving their services, but you still have to pay for that service.
Absolutely.
So if the artist has gone and said, no, please don't tell the bars not to play my music, it doesn't mean that they are against this system. It's just that because, it's something that has never happened to them, where an artist can receive something from that use of his work, and we reach at the level of feeling like this is what we deserve. And I've seen, please allow me to say this again.
Yes.
I've seen an artist they were a musician in Rwanda who were among the most popular musicians. I won't say his name in the name of the respect, but when he died alone, helplessly. Even the funeral services was a problem. There were only 7 people, adding the Minister of Culture. Back in the day was Mr. Habineza Joe. He died very helplessly, and he had nothing on his account, because when an artist in Rwanda is not performing on stage, then you have nothing.
That's true.
So I was afraid. I was still young, and I was doing music, and I was like, this job is dangerous. If someone can die like this, yet his music is played in every single wedding, every single bar, every single hotel. People play it whether live or the DJs. So if this is not done, every creator would die helpless.
I really like your point. Let's quickly go to our social media. We have very few minutes before we lock down the show, and I'd like us to go to our first tweet. And the first tweet is from someone called Kangho. And he says that, and I hope you can see it on the screens, he says, it's a series of tweets, but you're reading this one. I think our singing artists are frustrated when their work is reproduced and they have nothing, neither for appreciation nor for recognition. And this echoes what you were saying, Mani Martin, that no recognition. We have another tweet. It's from Claude. And Claude, unfortunately, we're having an issue with our Twitter feed. But another tweet is from Richard. And Richard says that intellectual property is intended to make sure the author or artist is rewarded with value equivalent for his or her effort. If we truly love and support our artists, let's be mindful of this. Before we go to the next tweet, I'm glad that at least those watching the show understand not only what you're saying, Richard, but also you.
Richard has made me feel very, very guilty.
For downloading
No,
YouTube
not for that. There's Jazz Junction on Friday, and Mani March is going to perform.
Yes.
Mani March is going to perform. I was going to ask him for a complimentary for the square, but Richard has made me think, no, let's not ask for a complimentary. Let's pay the full price.
Yeah, and very quickly on the issue of awareness. Sometimes I get issues with my friends when I try artistic work. It's like, what's wrong with you?
We know the guy.
Like you can.
That's terrible.
Yeah,
that's terrible.
Embracing vulnerability.
The mindset that he's talking
It
about,
needs to change.
someone to understand that for any works of art.
Yeah. And which brings us to the next tweet, and I'd like us to read this tweet. And this tweet is very interesting because this person says, he's called Claude. He says, hey guys, I think playing someone's music is not bad. What is bad is imitating someone's song, commonly known as Gushishura, without permission from the owner. Mani Martin should be glad because that is a great thing. He should be proud of.
I am glad.
But not for free.
But it doesn't mean that you have to use it for free.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And they're not doing him a favor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's, it's good work. Yeah.
For sure. And I'm glad you brought this up. We're coming to the end of the show. Richard, if you can have very brief closing remarks and also brief closing remarks from Mani Martin. Very briefly.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think as we've noticed, even from the a few tweets that we've received, there is still a long journey to go. But it's a joint effort.
Yes.
It's a joint effort on both sides. Copyright users, copyright holders. I'm limiting it to the scope of the discussion, but there are other intellectual property rights, but also all other players. And we should know that intellectual property is a property like any other, and actually intellectual property gives an exclusive right to the owner, to the holder, to be the one to authorize when it is used and how it is used. And whenever, maybe if I quickly come back to what Charles said, there is, among the exceptions, there is having a copy for personal use. That is allowed by the law. If you get a copy, if you use it for your personal use or within the family, the close the family environment. But any other performance, apart from other exceptions, again provided for by the law, should be with the consent of the owner.
Yes.
I just want to say that the society of Rwanda, the Rwandan society in general, should understand that the artist bills are paid by the money paid from the use of their work, not from the compliments that you give us. Even though we need it.
You can't eat compliments.
We need all of them, but the bills are paid by the money.
Absolutely.
And what I want to say again is I appreciate what RDB has done, even the things that I haven't known before. I really appreciate, but I still insist on more effort, not only from RDB, but even from us, the artists, and other players, so that this can be actually done in our country. And
please tell us very quickly, about Saturday.
I want to invite you about in my show, Kigali Jazz Junction. I'll be performing with Awilo Longomba and with my band. And this is the very first performance I'm going to do after my Japan tour in Kigali. So I'm inviting you. I'm going to give you something.
That explains the outfit.
Yes.
From Japan.
Thank you very much, Mani Martin. Charlie, always a pleasure to have you. Asante. Bernard, thank you as well.
I'll be at Jazz Junction.
Yes, I know. Without doubt.
That's a free commercial. RBA should send you an invoice.
Richard, thank you very much for joining the show. Great work by RDB for sure. And thank you for shedding light on a very important work that you're doing to really protect our artists and have them be rewarded for their efforts. Thank you once again to everyone. Please feel free to go to Kigali Jazz Junction on Saturday and see Mani Martin.
Friday,
Oh,
please.
Friday. Sorry, my bad. On Friday, a venue? Very
Friday
quickly?
night.
Camp Kigali.
Okay, Camp Kigali, Friday, which is the day after tomorrow, to see our artists here performing alongside. Awilo Longoma. Thank you very much for joining us. I'd just like to thank our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee. Keep the tweets coming using #TheSquareRW on your screen. And see you again next week. Have a good night.